My parents kicked me out of the house with nothing at 18. 10 years later, I returned, and what happened next? Shocked the entire family. My name is Serena. I am 28 years old, and for the past 10 years, I have lived two lives. One life that my family knew nothing about, and one they thought they had already destroyed. I want to tell you something before I begin. I am not telling this story for sympathy. I am not telling it for revenge. I am telling it because I spent too many years believing that being thrown away meant I was worthless. And I want anyone out there who has ever been discarded by the people who were supposed to love them most to hear what happened when I stopped waiting for their approval and started building something they never expected. This is my story. And it starts the night I was 18 years old, standing on a cold sidewalk in November, with a garbage bag full of my things, watching my childhood home disappear behind me. If the story resonates with you, please like and subscribe. It means more than you know. And drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. You would be surprised how much that simple gesture reminds me that I am not alone in sharing this. Part 1. The house that never felt like home. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. A white two-story colonial on Meadow Lane, in a quiet suburb called Halpern Grove. My father, Donald, was an accountant. My mother, Renata ran the local women's auxiliary and served on the school board. They were respected. They were visible. They were the kind of couple other parents admired at school functions. But inside that house, there were roles I never understood. There was a hierarchy I was never told about but somehow always felt. My brother Marcus was born 3 years before me. He was the eldest. He was the son. In our household, those two facts carried a weight that nothing I ever did could compete with. Marcus was tall, athletic, charming in the way that made teachers forgive him for incomplete homework. He played lacrosse. He laughed loudly. He filled every room he walked into with noise and warmth, and my parents orbited him the way small moons orbit a planet that does not notice them. I was quieter. I spent my childhood reading. I loved science, especially biology. I kept notebooks filled with observations about plants I grew on my windowsill and insects I found in the backyard. I was curious in a way that my parents found inconvenient. My questions were too many. My interests were too niche. My mother once told me, when I was about 11, that I was a lot to manage. I held on to that sentence for years. I turned it over in my mind the way you turn over a pebble, looking for something sharp beneath it. A lot to manage, that was what she said. Not curious, not passionate, not worth understanding. Just a lot to manage. My father was different with me than he was with Marcus. With Marcus, he was present. He watched every lacrosse game. He drove him to practice on Saturday mornings and came home laughing about something Marcus had said. He coached him through college applications with a patience and investment that was almost tender. With me, my father was polite. He asked about school in the general way adults ask about school when they are not truly interested in the answer. He nodded when I spoke about my science projects. He sometimes patted my shoulder. But he did not show up, not in the way that counted. I do not think my father hated me. I want to be precise about this. I think he simply did not know what to do with a daughter who did not need the things he understood how to give. He knew how to build a boy. He did not know how to nurture a girl who read thick books and argued with her teachers and did not care about prom committees. My mother was more complicated. She loved me in the way some people love a responsibility, with obligation and occasional resentment. She signed my permission slips. She bought my school clothes. She sat across from my teachers at parent conferences and smiled and said the right things. But at home, when it was just us, she would sigh when she looked at me, a small, tight sigh that she probably thought I did not notice. I noticed every single time. There was a moment when I was 14 that I think about sometimes. I had won a regional science competition. My project on soil microbiomes had beaten 16 other entries from across the county. I came home with a blue ribbon and a certificate signed by the county science director. My mother was on the phone when I walked in. She held up one finger without looking at me, the universal signal for wait. I waited. She finished her call. She looked at my ribbon and certificate. She said, "That's nice, sweetheart. Have you started your homework?" That night, my father told Marcus at dinner that his lacrosse team had made the regional tournament, and my parents ordered pizza to celebrate. I ate my slice quietly. I did not say anything about the blue ribbon. This was my childhood. Not brutal, not dramatic, just a slow and steady message, delivered daily through 1,000 small silences and overlooked accomplishments. The message was simple. You are not the priority here. You are not the one who matters most. I survived it. Children are remarkably good at surviving the families they are given. We adapt. We find pockets of warmth wherever they exist. Mine existed in books, in the corner of the school library where Mrs. Hadley would leave science journals for me, in the garden shed where I kept my seedlings and my notebooks, and spent hours alone in a way that felt like freedom rather than loneliness. I built an inner world because my outer world had made it clear there was not much space for me. And I was managing. I really was. I was managing all the way until the night of my high school graduation, when everything I had quietly endured finally broke through the surface and could no longer be ignored. Part 2. The night everything changed. I graduated third in my class. I had worked for that. I had stayed up late studying while Marcus attended parties. I had taken AP classes that my guidance counselor said would challenge me and completed every single one with distinction. I had applied to 6 universities and been accepted to 4, including Westfield University, which had one of the top biochemistry programs in the state. I had a full academic scholarship, partial, actually, 70% covered, but still, I had earned money that would take a significant burden off my parents. The graduation ceremony was at the high school football field. It was a warm June evening. I wore the white dress my mother had bought me, and I walked across that stage, and when they called my name and mentioned my academic honors, I heard applause. I was proud. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely proud. My family was in the stands. I found them afterward. My mother hugged me. My father said, "Good job." Marcus punched my shoulder lightly the way brothers do and said, "Smarty pants." And then came the dinner. We went to Giovanni's, the Italian restaurant on Fifth Avenue that my family reserved for special occasions. Birthdays, anniversaries. Marcus's lacrosse championship wins. It felt significant, being taken there. I thought it meant that this was finally my moment, that graduating third in my class with a scholarship to a 4-year university had earned me a seat at the table. Properly, for once. I was wrong. Halfway through dinner, my father cleared his throat. He had a way of doing that when he was about to say something important. He set down his fork. He looked at me. "Serena," he said, "we need to talk about your plans." I told him my plans. Westfield, biochemistry, the scholarship. I had already filled out the financial aid paperwork. I had calculated what my part-time job could cover. I was prepared. I had been preparing for months. My father nodded slowly. My mother looked at the tablecloth. "The thing is," my father said, "Marcus is going to need our support next year." I waited. "He's starting his business program at Caldwell," my father said. "The tuition is significant, and we've decided to invest in his venture fund. He's got a promising concept." Marcus was 21. He had graduated from a mid-tier business program with average grades. His venture concept was a sports equipment rental app that he had described to me twice over family dinners, and that I had privately, gently noted had several existing competitors. But I had kept my mouth shut because it was not my business, and because, in our family, Marcus's dreams were never questioned. "I understand that," I said carefully. "But my scholarship covers 70%. I only need support for the remaining 30, plus living expenses. I have a part-time job lined up." My father's expression shifted. Something closed behind his eyes. "We've done the numbers," he said. "We can't do both. And Marcus's opportunity is time-sensitive." I sat very still. "So you're choosing not to help me with college," I said. "We're choosing to direct our resources toward the most viable outcome," my father said. That was the language he used. Resources. Viable outcome. The language of accounting applied to his children. My mother finally looked up. "You're so capable, Serena. You'll figure it out. You always do." I remember the sound of silverware scraping plates. I remember a couple at the next table laughing at something. I remember looking at Marcus, who was eating his eggplant parmesan with the focused attention of someone who had already processed this decision and made peace with it. He knew. He had known before dinner. I did not cry at the table. I had too much pride for that. I smiled carefully. The way I had taught myself to smile when I was being diminished in small rooms. And I said I understood, and I ate the rest of my meal in silence. 2 weeks later, I learned the full extent of what choosing Marcus over me actually meant. My parents sat me down in the living room. My mother had her hands folded in her lap. My father had a piece of paper on the coffee table. They had decided, he explained, that it would be best if I moved out. Not immediately, he was careful to add, as though that softness changed the meaning. But within the month, the house was being refinanced to fund Marcus's venture. The room I slept in had been earmarked for a home office. And since I was 18, legally an adult, and since I had, they reminded me, shown such remarkable capability and independence, they were confident I would land on my feet. They were evicting me. I sat in that living room and heard my father explain to me, in the careful neutral language he used for spreadsheets, that they had decided I was better equipped to handle the world alone than my brother was, and that this made me the one they were releasing. Not the one they were proud of, not the one they trusted, the one they were releasing, like something wild that had grown too inconvenient to keep contained. I asked if I had done something wrong. My mother said, "Of course not, sweetheart. This is just practical." I asked if Marcus knew. My father said, "Marcus needs stability right now." I did not ask any more questions. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening in late July, I packed my things into 2 bags and a garbage bag, and I left the white colonial on Meadow Lane. My father shook my hand. My mother hugged me stiffly and told me to call if I needed anything, in the way people say things they do not mean but need to say to feel better about themselves. Marcus was not home. I stood on the sidewalk in the evening heat, and I looked at the house and I made a promise to myself. Not a promise of revenge, not a promise of anger, just a promise that I would never again measure my worth by what that house had decided to give me. Then I picked up my bags and I walked. Part 3. The years nobody saw. What people do not tell you about being cast out at 18 is that it is not a single dramatic moment. It is a series of very small, very exhausting moments that pile up like stones. The first night I spent at a friend's house, her name was Danny, and she was the kind of person who did not ask too many questions and made pasta for dinner and let me sleep on her couch without making me feel like a charity case. I stayed 3 days before I knew I could not stay longer without burdening her. I found a room. A tiny room in a shared house near the university campus, rented by a woman named Mrs. Berdereau, Okafor, who collected first and last month's rent up front and asked no questions as long as the checks cleared. I had saved money from 2 years of weekend jobs. It was just enough. I enrolled at Westfield. I showed up on the first day of biochemistry orientation with my scholarship confirmation and a notebook, and the particular kind of focus that comes from having no alternative. Failure was not a dramatic concept for me. It was a practical one. If I failed, there was no safety net. There was no room in the white colonial I could return to. There was no family meeting where things would be reconsidered. There was only forward. I worked 22 hours a week at a campus coffee shop. I studied between shifts. I ate cheap. I wore the same 4 outfits in rotation. I learned to sleep efficiently and wake quickly and move through the world without expecting softness from it. Some days were harder than others. There were evenings when I sat in Mrs. Okafor's narrow kitchen, eating rice and canned beans, and I let myself feel the unfairness of it. Not for long. Feeling sorry for yourself is expensive when you have limited time. But I let myself feel it for a few minutes, and then I put it away and opened my textbook. My professors noticed me. That was something I had not expected. I had assumed that a girl working 3 jobs and surviving on minimal sleep would be invisible in lecture halls filled with students whose parents paid their tuition. But Professor Alina, who taught molecular biology in my sophomore year, stopped me after class one afternoon and asked if I had considered research work. I had considered nothing except surviving the month. She invited me into her lab. I said yes. The lab changed everything. Not immediately. Nothing changes immediately. But slowly, over months and then years, being in that lab gave me a language for the thing I had always been. The way I observed, the patience I had with slow processes, the ability to sit with uncertainty and document it without needing it to resolve before I was ready. Science requires a particular kind of endurance, the willingness to fail many times in the service of a single breakthrough. I had been practicing that endurance my entire life without knowing it had a name. I graduated 4 years later with honors. Professor Alina wrote me a graduate school recommendation that she told me later was the strongest she had written in 15 years of teaching. I did not tell my parents I was graduating. I did not invite them to the ceremony. I sat in the auditorium with Danny, who had driven 3 hours to be there, and when they called my name, I walked across that stage and I felt something I had no word for. It was not happiness exactly, it was more like confirmation, like something that had been argued about for a long time had finally been settled. After graduation, I was accepted to a doctoral program in molecular biology at Creston University, one of the most competitive programs in the country. The offer came with a full fellowship and a stipend. I accepted it without hesitation. The next 4 years were the hardest and the best of my life. I worked under Dr. Emmett Boss, a man who communicated primarily through grunts and precise scientific annotations in red pen, and who gave me more real education in 1 year than I had received in 3 semesters of coursework. I was part of a team researching cellular regeneration pathways that had applications in wound healing and tissue repair. In my 3rd year, we published. Our paper appeared in a peer-reviewed journal that Professor Voss told me, in his particular understated way, was not nothing. It was not nothing. It was, in fact, the beginning. After my doctorate, I was recruited by a biomedical research company called Archelian Sciences. They were small but sharp, about 60 people at the time, working on next-generation wound care technologies. I joined as a research scientist. Within 2 years, I was leading my own team. I was 26 years old, earning more money than I had ever imagined, living in a 1-bedroom apartment in the city that I had furnished slowly and carefully, with things I chose myself, and I had not spoken to my family in 8 years. 8 years of silence, 8 years of building, 8 years of becoming something they did not know existed. I had not told them any of it. I had moved cities. I had changed my phone number once, early on, when my mother had left a voicemail on my birthday that was more about how hard things were for the family than about me. I had not called back. I had not reached out at holidays. I had built a life so completely separate from Meadow Lane that some days it genuinely felt like a different universe. I had friends. I had colleagues who became something close to family. I had a therapist named Dr. Wren who helped me understand, over many careful conversations, the difference between detachment and healing, and who told me once that choosing peace over obligation is not abandonment, it is self-preservation. I was not healed entirely. I am not sure you ever fully heal from the childhood message that you are the expendable one. But I was living. I was building. I was enough. And then one morning in October, 10 years after I had walked away from that sidewalk, I got a phone call that changed everything again. Part 4. The call I did not expect. The number was Marcus's. I stared at it for a long moment. I had not blocked his number specifically, only my parents' house line. Seeing it appear on my phone screen was like being briefly transported, against my will, back to a version of myself I had worked very hard to grow beyond. I almost did not answer. I want to be honest about that. The version of me that had learned to protect herself from that family had a very strong argument for declining. But something made me answer. Curiosity, maybe. Or the part of me that was never quite finished with that chapter, no matter how far I had walked from it. Serena. Marcus's voice was different from what I remembered. Older. Flatter. The easy confidence that had always buoyed him was not present. Marcus, I said. A pause. I didn't know if you'd pick up, he said. Neither did I said. Another did I said. Another pause. I waited. I had learned from years of scientific work that sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is wait for the data to come to you. It's Dad, Marcus said finally. He had a heart attack 3 weeks ago. He's been in the hospital. He's stable now, but it was serious. Mom wanted me to call you. I sat down. Not from distress exactly, from the weight of the information settling in. Is he going to be okay? I asked. The doctors think so. With changes, he can't work for a while. Maybe not at all. A pause. There are some financial things that have come up. Mom has been trying to manage, but it's complicated, and there's some stuff with the house. I did not ask what stuff with the house. I had a feeling I already understood. They want to see you, Marcus said. Mom asked me to ask if you would come. I held the phone very still. 10 years. Not a single birthday call. Not a single acknowledgement of the doctorate, or the publications, or the career I had built from the nothing they had handed me. And now, because there was a crisis, because things were complicated, because the house was in trouble and the money was uncertain, they wanted to see me. I'll think about it, I said. I hung up. Part 5. The decision I called Dr. Wren that afternoon. She picked up between sessions and listened to me explain the call without interrupting, which was one of the things I valued most about her. When I finished, she asked me a simple question. What do you want, Serena? Not what do you owe them? Not what is the right thing? What do you actually want? I thought about it for a long time. The honest answer was complicated. Part of me wanted nothing to do with any of it. Part of me was curious. Part of me wanted to stand in that house again, not as the girl who had been removed from it, but as the woman I had become. And I was not entirely sure that wanting was healthy, but it was real. I think I want to go, I said, but on my terms. What are your terms? Dr. Wren asked. I had to think about that too. My terms were simple, it turned out. I would go as myself, not as the girl who had needed their approval, not as someone seeking acknowledgement or apology. I would go as Serena, 28 years old, who had built her own life and needed nothing from them except to close a chapter that had been left open for a decade. If they offered anything real, I would receive it. If they did not, I would still be okay. I had practiced being okay without them for 10 years. I was very good at it. I called Marcus back. I'll come, I said. Tell me when, he told me. The following Saturday, a family dinner at the house on Meadow Lane. My parents, Marcus's wife Gina, and apparently a family friend named Harold, who was also the family's financial advisor and who had been helping my father manage some of the crisis. A dinner, in that house, with a financial advisor. I understood then that this was not just about seeing me. There was something specific they wanted. I filed that understanding away carefully and said I would be there at 6. Part 6, the drive back. I drove myself. 4 hours from the city, down the highway, and then the smaller roads that became more familiar with each mile. The suburbs appeared gradually, the way they always do, the density of the city loosening into strip malls and then neighborhoods with lawns, and then the streets I recognized. Meadow Lane looked smaller than I remembered. This is what people always say about returning to childhood places, and I had always found it slightly cliched, but it was true. The street was the same. The white colonial was the same, although the garden looked unkempt in a way it never had when my mother was managing it. But the scale of everything had shrunk. I had grown. That was the simple explanation. I had grown and the street had stayed the same size. I sat in my car for a few minutes before going in. I looked at the house. I thought about the girl who had stood on that sidewalk with a garbage bag, looking back at it. I thought about everything she had done since. Then I got out of the car. I was wearing a simple wool dress in dark green and low heels. I had not dressed to impress. I had dressed the way I always dressed for important meetings, which was carefully and without apology. The front door opened before I reached the porch. My mother was standing in the doorway. She looked older. Of course she did. 10 years is a significant span of time. Her hair had gone gray at the temples, and she was thinner than I remembered, with a tension around her mouth that had not been there before. She looked at me with an expression I did not immediately know how to name. Serena, she said. Her voice broke on my name. Mom, I said. She stepped forward and hugged me. It was tighter than the hug she had given me at graduation, tighter than any hug I remembered from her. I let her hold me for a moment. I did not cry. I was not made of stone, but I had done most of my crying about this family in private, in my own apartment, in the years when it had needed to be done. I had very little left. She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were wet. You look wonderful, she said. Thank you, I said. How is Dad? He's here, she said. He wanted to come down for dinner. The doctor said limited activity, but he insisted. I followed her inside. The house smelled the same. That caught me off guard. The smell of it, wood polish and something baking and the faint perpetual smell of my father's coffee. Smell is the sense most directly connected to memory, which I knew from the biology, but knowing it does not prepare you for the actual sensation of being returned to a specific emotional time by the smell of a house you left a decade ago. I took a breath and kept moving. The living room had changed. Less furniture somehow. The shelves were different. There was a hospital-grade adjustable chair near the window that had not been there before, and I understood it was for my father. He was in it when I entered the room. Donald. My father. He had aged more dramatically than my mother. The heart attack had taken something from him that was visible even from across the room. He was thinner in the way that illness makes people thin, with a pallor beneath his skin and a careful stillness to his movements that had replaced the competent efficiency he used to carry. He looked at me when I walked in and something moved across his face that I could not fully read. "Serena," he said. "Dad," I said. I crossed the room and sat in the chair nearest to him. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I was," he said. "Doctor says I'll be all right if I slow down." A small pause. "I haven't been very good at that." "No," I agreed. A silence stretched between us, not hostile, not warm exactly, just real. Marcus came into the room from the kitchen. He was heavier than I remembered, with the beginning of gray at his temples and a careful wariness in his eyes when he looked at me. He had the look of someone managing multiple things at once and not managing them well. "You made it," he said. "I said I would," I said. His wife Gina followed him. She was a pretty, quiet woman who shook my hand and said she had heard a lot about me, which I imagined was true, though probably not comprehensive. We moved to the dining room. My mother had cooked. The table was set carefully, with the good dishes, which meant something about the occasion even if I was not sure yet what it meant. Harold, the financial advisor, arrived at 6:15. He was a small, neat man in his 60s with reading glasses and a leather portfolio that he set beside his plate without opening. We ate. My mother had made the pot roast she always made for family occasions, and it was still very good. We talked about careful things, the neighborhood, the weather, Marcus's children, two of them, a boy and a girl, who were apparently with Gina's mother for the evening. I answered questions about my work in general terms. I said I was in biomedical research. I said I had been with my company for 2 years. I said it was going well. I did not offer more. I had not decided yet how much to offer or when. After dinner, my mother cleared the plates and brought coffee. Harold opened his portfolio, and then the real conversation began. Part 7. The truth on the table. Harold had a way of presenting financial information that was careful and measured, like reading a diagnosis without enjoying it. He explained, without preamble, that my father's heart attack had interrupted his work at a critical moment. The accounting practice he had built over 30 years had lost 2 major clients during his absence, as the interim coverage had not been satisfactory. His income had dropped significantly. The house refinancing they had done, the one to fund Marcus's venture, had left them with substantial monthly obligations. Marcus's venture. I kept my face neutral. The sports equipment rental app. It had launched. It had struggled. It had, Harold said quietly, not performed to projections. The investment my parents had made was largely gone. My father sat very still through this recitation. My mother looked at her coffee cup. Marcus looked at the tablecloth. Harold closed his portfolio. "The family is facing some meaningful financial pressure," he said. "There are some decisions to be made about the property and about near-term support. Your parents wanted you here as part of that conversation." I let the silence sit for a moment. "What conversation specifically?" I asked. My mother looked up. "We need help, Serena, just temporarily, while your father recovers. Marcus has his family to think about, and the business losses were significant for him as well." I looked at Marcus. He had the grace, at least, to look uncomfortable. "The business didn't work out the way we planned," he said. "I know that. I know what Mom and Dad put in. It kills me." He paused. "I know you probably think this is exactly what you expected." "I don't have expectations about your business," I said. "That was never my concern." "Serena," my father said. His voice was careful. "I know we didn't do right by you. When you left, when we asked you to leave." He stopped. He had the face of a man who had practiced saying something, and found that the practice had not made the doing easier. "I've thought about that for a long time." "Have you?" I said. It was not a question exactly. "Yes," he said, "I have." Another silence. I could feel everyone in the room watching me. Marcus, Gina, my mother, Harold, with his neutral professional composure, my father in his adjustable chair with the pallor of illness and the weight of 10 years of something he had not quite named. I thought about what Dr. Wren had asked me. "What do you want, Serena?" Here is what I wanted. I want to be clear about this because the story is about to turn in a way that I need you to understand correctly. I did not want revenge. I had spent years making sure the resentment that could have become bitterness was instead channeled into something productive. I was not there to punish anyone. I was there because they were family, which is a complicated and imperfect category, and because my father had nearly died, and because somewhere under all the hurt and the distance, there was still something that recognized these people as the origin of me, even if they had not treated that origin with care. But I was also not going to pretend. I was not going to let the need of the moment rewrite the history of it. "I'll help," I said. My mother exhaled. I heard the relief in it. Conditionally, I added. The room went still again. "I'm going to help because Dad is sick, and because this family needs stability while he recovers," I said. "Not because the history of what happened between us has been resolved. It hasn't. And I'm not going to let this conversation paper over 10 years by treating this as a normal family dinner where everything is fine." My father nodded slowly. "I need to understand what happened," I said. "Not tonight, not all at once. But I need there to be a real conversation eventually about what you decided to do and why. Because I left this house believing I was the least important person in it, and I built my entire life around proving that wrong. And I need you to understand what that cost." My mother's eyes were wet again. Marcus put his face in his hands briefly, then lowered them. He looked at me directly for the first time all evening. "I should have said something," he said. "When they told me their plan, I knew it was wrong and I didn't push back." "No," I said. "You didn't." "I'm sorry," he said. I looked at him for a long moment. Marcus, my brother, who had been given everything and who sat here now with failed ventures and borrowed money and the same family dinner tension we had always been inside together. "I know you are," I said. It was not forgiveness exactly, but it was a beginning. Part 8. What they did not know. The financial conversation with Harold extended over 2 visits. I came back the following Saturday and the Saturday after that. I reviewed the paperwork. I asked precise questions because I had learned to ask precise questions. I understood the scope of the problem. The house was manageable if the monthly obligation was addressed. My father's practice could potentially be sold as a going concern, which would produce a significant one-time income. There were options. They required organization and patience, but there were options. On the 3rd visit, Harold asked me what I did professionally. My mother and father were in the room. I told them, not the simplified version I had offered at dinner, the full version, the doctorate, the publications, the work at Archelian Sciences, the team I led, the research area and its applications, and what the company was building and where it was heading. There was a very long silence when I finished. My father looked at me in a way I had not seen him look at me before. Something in his face that I can only describe as recognition, like he was seeing something that had been present all along that he had simply never looked at directly. "You did all of this," he said, "after we sent you away?" "I did all of this," I said, "because I had no other choice." My mother put her hand over her mouth. I watched her process it. The degree, the career, the company, the life I had assembled from the garbage bag they had handed me. "We didn't know," she said. "We didn't know any of this." "You didn't ask," I said, gently, without cruelty, simply as a fact. "I should have asked," she said. Harold, who had maintained his professional composure through everything, looked down at his portfolio with the focused attention of a man deliberately giving a family their privacy. Marcus sat back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then he looked at me. "You built all of this alone," he said. Not a question, an understanding. "With help," I said, "from people who chose to help me. But essentially, yes." He was quiet for a long time. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I know that might not mean anything coming from me right now, but I am." I did not know how to respond to that, so I simply nodded. My father cleared his throat, the sound he made before saying something important. "I was wrong," he said. "Not just in the way we handled the financial decision. I was wrong before that, for a long time before that. In the way I saw you, in the way I let your mother's and my priorities make you invisible in your own home." He paused. "I don't know if that's fixable. I don't know if you want it fixed." But I needed to say it. I looked at my father. The man who had spoken to me in the language of spreadsheets about why his resources were better directed elsewhere, who had shaken my hand on the night I left. He was old now. He was sick. He was not the intimidating authority of my childhood. He was just a person who had made choices that had hurt me and who was sitting with the knowledge of those choices. "Thank you," I said, "for saying that." I did not say it was okay, because it was not entirely okay, but I said thank you, and I meant it, and that was the most honest thing I had. Part 9, The Dinner They Will Not Forget. 2 months after my first return to Medellin, my mother organized a family dinner, a proper one. Extended family. My Aunt Claudette and her husband, my father's brother, Uncle Ray, and his wife, a cousin who lived nearby, Harold and his wife, who had apparently become close to the family during the crisis months. She invited me. She told me what it was. She did not frame it as an announcement or a reveal. She simply said the family was gathering and she wanted me there. I went. I wore the green dress again. It had become, in some private way, my armor. The house was full when I arrived. Voices from the dining room. The smell of my mother's cooking expanded to serve a crowd. Aunt Claudette met me in the hallway and held my face in her hands, and said she was so glad I had come back, in the way that told me the family had been told some version of the story. Dinner was long and loud in the way family dinners are when enough people are present. My father sat at the head of the table, moving slowly but present. My mother moved between kitchen and table with the practiced efficiency of a woman who has been hosting family dinners for 30 years. Midway through the meal, Uncle Ray, who I remembered as the jovial one who always asked too many questions at family gatherings, leaned across the table and said, "So, Serena, Marcus tells me you're in research? What kind?" This was the moment. I did not plan it as a moment, but it became one. I explained my work. Cellular regeneration, wound healing applications, the team I led at Archelian Sciences, the technology we were developing and its potential clinical uses. The table got quieter as I talked, not in a rude way. In the way that happens when someone in a room you have known all your life says something that reframes your entire understanding of them. Aunt Claudette said, "How long have you been doing this?" I told her. Uncle Ray said, "And you started all this after university? Where did you study?" I told him. He looked at my father. Something passed between them in the look that I did not have full access to but could feel the shape of. "Donald," he said, "did you know all of this?" My father said, "I know now." The table absorbed that statement. The not I knew then. The not I was always proud, the honest now. My cousin, who was in her mid-20s and had always been kind to me in the scattered way cousins are. "When you are not close," said quietly. "That's incredible, Serena, really." And something shifted in the room. Not dramatically. Not with someone standing up and making a speech. Just a gradual, collective recalibration. These people who had known me as the overlooked second child, the quiet one, the less important one, were sitting across from a 30-year-old woman with a doctorate and a career in one of the most interesting fields in biology, who had built all of it independently, who had needed nothing from them to do it. My mother sat down after her last trip to the kitchen and looked at me from across the table. She had been listening. She had heard everything. And in her face, I saw something I had been waiting my whole life to see, without knowing I was waiting for it. She saw me. For the first time, properly, she saw me. Not a lot to manage. Not the expendable one. Me. I held her gaze for a moment. Then I reached for the bread basket and passed it to Aunt Claudette, and the dinner continued. Part 10. What I chose in the weeks that followed, I helped my parents navigate the financial situation. I connected them with a business attorney I knew through work who helped structure the sale of my father's practice at a fair value. I reviewed the refinancing and identified a more manageable structure. I did not give them money. I gave them access to people who knew how to solve the specific problems they had, and I stayed present through the process. This was a choice. I want to be clear about that. No one was owed this from me. I made this choice because I decided, after 10 years of separation, that I wanted to participate in some version of a family, and that participation required accepting that families are imperfect, and that people sometimes cause harm that they cannot fully repair. The harm my parents caused me cannot be fully repaired. The years of invisibility cannot be given back. The struggle of those early adult years, The years of rice and canned beans and 22-hour work weeks and falling asleep over textbooks, those cannot be retroactively made less hard, but I did not need them to be. I had lived those years and they had made me. The difficulty of them was part of the formation of me. And while I wish my parents had been different, I do not wish away the person I became in their absence. My relationship with my family is not what it was. It is not a warm, uncomplicated reunion. It is careful. It is honest in a way it never was before. My father and I have had 3 conversations that went deeper than any conversation we had in my entire childhood. Conversations about expectation and disappointment and what parents owe their children and what children do and do not owe their parents. They are hard conversations. They are also real ones. That is new. My mother calls me on Sunday evenings. Sometimes the calls are brief, sometimes they are longer. She has started asking about my work in the way that suggests she is actually listening to the answer. She told me 2 months ago, at the end of a call, that she was proud of me, that she had always been proud of me, but had not known how to show it, that she had confused managing with mothering, and she was sorry. I sat with that for a long time after the call ended. It was not enough. And it was also something. Both of those things can be true. Marcus and I have a different relationship now. Less simple than sibling relationships are supposed to be, but more honest than ours ever was. He has rebuilt some of what was lost. He works in financial planning now, which I find both ironic and appropriate. He has his children, the boy and the girl I met at a birthday party last spring, who are funny and curious and remind me in small ways of what I was at their age. At that birthday party, his daughter Maya, who is 7, asked me what I did at work. I told her I studied cells. I told her cells are like tiny machines that build everything alive, including her. She looked at me with the focused attention of a child, encountering a genuinely interesting idea, and asked if I had ever seen one. I told her yes. I told her they were beautiful. She said she wanted to see one too. I told her I would take her to my lab someday, and I meant it. Epilogue. What I want you to know, I am 28 years old. I have a doctorate in molecular biology. I lead a research team working on technology that may one day help people heal from wounds that currently cannot be fully treated. I live in an apartment I chose, surrounded by things I chose, making decisions about a life I built. I was thrown out of my childhood home with nothing. I want you to understand what that sentence contains, because it is easy to read it as a story about injustice and resilience and success. And it is all of those things, but it is also something more specific. It is a story about what happens when you decide that the people who underestimated you do not get to define you. For a long time, I carried the weight of my family's choices. The favoritism, the financial betrayal, the night on the sidewalk. I carried it the way you carry something heavy you have convinced yourself is necessary. I thought that carrying it was the same as processing it. It was not. The weight got lighter when I stopped waiting for my family to acknowledge what they had done before I was allowed to be okay. When I stopped making my healing contingent on their apology. When I decided that I was going to build my life to its full potential regardless of whether anyone who had doubted me ever admitted they were wrong. They have admitted it now. Some of it, as much as people can. And it matters. I will not pretend it does not matter, but here is what I want the person watching this. The one who is maybe sitting in a situation that feels too familiar to understand. You do not have to wait for the acknowledgement. You do not have to wait for the apology or the recognition or the moment when the people who cast you out realize what they lost. You can start building now. You can start before the apology comes. You can build so completely that by the time they look up, you are already somewhere they cannot see from where they're standing. Your worth was never in their hands. It was never subject to their determination of it. They did not create it when they approved of you, and they did not destroy it when they did not. You are not the expendable one. You were never the expendable one. You were simply in a room where people had not learned yet to see what you were. Leave that room. Build your own, I promise you. The view from outside, it is something worth working for. If this story moved you in any way, please like this video and subscribe. Every like and subscription helps this story reach someone who might need to hear it today. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Tell me if any part of this resonated. Tell me your own story if you feel safe doing so. This space is yours. And if you are in the middle of your own beginning, If you are standing on your own sidewalk right now, wondering how to start, just know that someone built something real from exactly where you are standing. You can too. This is Serena, and this is my story.